Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 5 Drinks Every Night, Quarantine Edition. Today we're talking to SABINE SHEEHAN from Lambay Whiskey. But before we do, like and subscribe. SABINE, thank you so much for joining us. 5 Drinks or Midnight, 5 drinks, 5 questions, midnight, whatever comes first. How you doing?
I'm good, Tim. Thank you so much. It's great to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
So I guess our first question, what are we drinking first?
We're going to start off with Lambay small batch blend. It's the blue bottle. So let's pour ourselves a nice dram.
Excellent.
And I'm going to mix it up with, because we're going to start off this session with a light, refreshing drink, I think. So I'm going to put a little bit of ice in it. And I'm going to mix it with a beautiful Fever Tree tonic. Which I think really brings out lots of that lovely floral tone and sweetness. And then something that's going to be really delicious, I take a little bit of grapefruit wedge and I'm just going to stream it in around the rim of that glass. And then I'm just going to diffuse the oils from that grapefruit and literally plop that in, and you've got a citrus quench.
Excellent. I did mine a little bit wrong, but because when you said wedge, I was like, all right. I was like, okay, well, now.
Well, at least you've got your 5 a day on there with a bit of grapefruit.
Yeah. So,
Slow it down.
all right. Well, cheers.
Cheers. Ding, ding.
So, question 1, we'll get right into it. So, you have 16 years of experience in the spirits industry. How did you get started?
Okay, so will I tell you the professional story or the real story?
We always want the real story.
All right, okay. Well, I suppose my love of whiskey actually came from my grandparents. My grandmother was always famous for drinking a very specific baby whiskey in her handbag. And my grandfather, who used to work for a rather well-known Irish beer company. So therefore, there was always a theme of alcohol in our family. And my father was a very big advocate of a certain whiskey from across the islands from where I am. So roll on then to me being a young adult and kind of experimenting with what my chosen drop would be in a glass. I'm afraid I just wasn't a beer drinker. I wasn't a vodka drinker or anything else. I just always drank whiskey.
Excellent.
And I would either drink it with a drop of water, or I drink it with a soda, or I drink it straight. And people used to think I was the weirdest girl they ever met, because that was like in the late 80s, 90s. Yeah, you know, a chick at a bar ordering whiskey even back then was considered a little bit, but that's me. I've always been there. So then professionally, I landed into the drinks business in 2006 actually, where I got a job with Irish Distillers here in Ireland, and working within their brand homes team. I was the marketing manager of their brand home in Dublin, and also sales and marketing for their Middleton experience in County Cork. And you know, through them, you get fantastic training. You've got exposure to the best masters in the business.
Yep.
Hey ho to everyone down in Cork. But really and truly, my love for whiskey just exploded through that. I was always surrounded by it. That I worked with tourism and whiskey, how closely they work together. And then at the same time, kind of growing my ambassadorial skills, doing tastings and trade shows and events. And really traveling the world and spreading the gospel for Ireland's leading brand at the time, and still is. So then I roll on then to 2016, 2017, I got proposed to start something new, and I took up that challenge, and now I'm a Lambay whiskey woman, and I haven't looked back since.
Excellent. That's a great.
Awesome.
What was so? Your grandmother was that she had it?
Yeah, I mean, it was customary of women those days in pubs. I mean, in Ireland, Tim, you know, women sometimes weren't even allowed in the pubs, and when they were told to sit quietly in the snug.
Yeah.
Yeah, So my grandmother kind of refused to conform to that social type of structure, and she used to not bother going at all. So she just went around for walks with a little handbag. And no, I can still, there's this kind of lovely sensorial memory I have of her, because I deal a lot with smell and aroma naturally when you work with whiskey. But one of the earliest aromas I can remember is that kind of soft matching of baby powder that she used to have on her, being a sweet lipstick smell from her handbag, and then the kind of effusion of ethyl alcohol and alcohol kind of submersed right underneath all of that baby powder fluffiness. And that was the whiskey bottle that had almost seeped through the silk lining of her purse, and it's something that has stayed with me forever.
That's awesome. That's a good, yeah, that certain smell, like, again, yeah, I mean, same, like, there's just my grandfather owned a bar, so like that smell of like walking into the bar, and like my favorite bar here in New York, which I haven't been to since March, but like you walk down the stairs and there's just, as soon as the doorman always opened the door and you hit that first step, and that's you knew you were home, and like that's the yeah.
Absolutely. It's the same thing when you walk, like you said, into your local bar. I mean, I come from Limerick originally. I'm living in Dublin, and one of my favorite pubs in Limerick was Tom Collins's. It's still there today. And it's a typical kind of, you know, I'm pretty traditional. It's kind of an old man's place in that sense of the layout, but not so much the customer demographic. It's a pretty cool bar. But the layout is kind of that kind of skinny bar with, you know, little kind of sections in colored glass going down along the bar, and just kind of leather back seats, like bus seats, coming up against the edge of the wall. And literally, I mean, you were just jamming people through there, but the smell of the leather,
yeah,
and the smell of the cigarettes that used to once be there, and the cigar smoke, but ultimately the smell of porter and a cheese toasted sandwich. Oh my God, I would get up in the middle of the night for that. Seriously.
Amazing.
I love that. So yes, aromas, smells are, you know, they're part of my DNA.
I hear you. That's amazing. All right. Well, that's question one. So super easy, no pain.
I survived.
There you go.
So the chocolate I'm using is 65% cocoa, and I usually kind of tend to go up to 75%. This is Mia. So this is a craft Irish chocolate brand. And the reason why I use them is not only they're exceptionally good, but their whole ethos is around sustainability and fair trade. So this is a Madagascar dark chocolate. And the reason why I go dark rather than milk, Tim, is because obviously the dark has the bitterness that you want to kind of pull the fats aside and the whiskey, and it just pulls those taste flavors apart in your tongue. So first of all, have you got your whiskey in your glass?
Ready.
Okay, I need a little bit in my glass. So the one I have has got little chips of dried cranberry in it and coconut, right? So the taste notes on our small batch blend, and you can see it on the taste wheel on the back, is attributed to coconut, almonds, dried pepper, and you've got that kind of malt coming through that you'd expect. So when you take your chocolate, what you want it to do is kind of melt on the tip of your tongue first. So just take a little snip, okay? Suck on it for a little bit. Really draw out the saliva on the sides of your cheeks. So the darker the chocolate, the more bitter it is, and the more it draws your saliva out. And what you're really doing there is getting a sense of the flavor of the chocolate. Now, before you are tempted to chew it, I want you to take a wee sip of the small batch blend. Before you chew it, just try and keep it on your tongue. Hold it, swishing it around a bit. I mean, what you should be left with is this kind of lovely, creamy aftertaste on your tongue.
That's good.
It is. It's a way of, the reason why I do this is because when it separates all of the different tastes that you've had now, for me, it's evening time here, I've had whatever, eaten today between breakfast and lunch and everything else. My palate is pretty confused. It can't really decide, what is what. But when you take even a dried cheese or a dark chocolate, or even some of those very exotic fruits, first of all, into your mouth, what you're doing is just you're cleansing your palate, but you're also creating all of those kind of flavor compounds in your saliva to appreciate them when you bring the whiskey in on top of it, okay? So when I usually pair chocolate with whiskey, I'm creating a drinking occasion, Tim. For me, it's not just about, here's a glass of whiskey and I'm just going to drink it here on my own. I actually turn it into a little bit of a moment. Why not? We deserve it. Life is short, right? So when you take your little sip and your chunk of chocolate after your first taste, it becomes even more appreciative.
It's so good.
And excuse me for talking with my mouth full, but this is something that I've really learned to appreciate.
Oh, wow.
And I think with the small batch blend, I choose this kind of coconut, cranberry, dark chocolate. When I'm talking about the single malt, I up the scale to a 95% dark chocolate, super bitter, almost like a salted caramel. Try and steer away from the temptation of the cigar because that's something that I hold for rare occasions. But really creating that kind of drinking moment where you can appreciate your whiskey with a cheese of your choice, but personally for me, it's chocolate. I'm in heaven. And this is what I think is a really good idea to do. So it's just a different way of savoring it on the palate,
Excellent. Oh, wow. It's so good.
I call the small batch blend my daytime whiskey. And I call our second variant the single malt my nighttime whiskey. It's as simple as that.
Very nice. That's a good analogy.
Why not?
Your day drinker and your nighttime drinker. So yeah, that's perfect. All right. Well, on to question 2, kind of comes back to your little friend right there, which is, how did the puffin become the mascot for Lambay?
Yeah, good question, I guess. So this is Willie. We call him Willie. Is his nickname. And the reason why we have a puffin on the label of our logo and label of our bottle and kind of inherent in anything we do is because of the island of Lambay. So what is Lambay? And it's essentially a tiny island off the coast of Ireland. It's literally 3.5 miles, 5 kilometers from Dublin. It's kind of hidden in plain sight. Everybody in Ireland and in Dublin can see the island, but not many people have been there. The reason why is because it's privately owned by one family. And I'll get into that in a minute, but the island itself is a nature reserve, right? So there's something like 120 species of bird on the island. Everything from guillemots, kittiwakes, seagulls, herons, and above all, puffins, who are called North Atlantic auks, if we want to get really descriptive. And you usually find those in Greenland or Iceland, but they have made their home on Lambay, which is quite unusual. And so they nest there every year, and they're such a quirky little bird. Have you ever seen a puffin try and land? Have you ever seen one? Okay, they're clumsy. They're like you've just come out of a bar at 3 a.m. I just think it's perfect. They just kind of fly in and then they just kind of fall all over the place. I'm not saying I'm condoning that behavior, but I just think it's so cute when you see this happen with the puffin. And but apart from that, they're an eccentric little bird. They're full of curiosity. They're friendly. And because they are so unusual for this kind of side of Europe, and particularly in Ireland, we chose the little puffin to be the hero on our logo. We think he kind of reflects what we're trying to do. He's adventurous. He's got an untamed spirit, a little bit of wildness at heart. And what he has every effort to fly, he doesn't always gracefully land. But, at the end of the day, we like what he represents. And, and he's kind of encompassed then in the little tuxedo, which is the story linking to the island and the family who live there. And Lambay Island is also home to, your usual domestic farm animals, but there's more animals there than human beings, Tim. Like there's only 6 human beings living on that island in off-grid living, totally 100% sustainable, in a very private environment. And then there's far more animals than there is humans. And in the world we live in today, I think that's really cool, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so where does this idea come from? I guess, you know, the way I was telling you about how to explore different tastes when you're like pairing food or delicacies with whiskey. Oh, by the way, I meant to say, if I could shuck an oyster for you right now, that would be my number one with the single malt, because it is amazing. And I'll explain why in a minute. So the single malt, as you know, is partially matured on the island of Lambay. So what we're talking about is island maturation. And what that means is it's where salt and brine and all of the maritime conditions surrounding this, you know, warehouse where our casks are being infused into the wood, right? Because like wood is porous. So naturally the environment that it's in is going to be absorbing a lot of what's in the air. So there's a certain amount of saltiness and brininess in this whiskey, okay? Small portion, tiny amount. It's not like that when you smell it, you're gonna go, oh, that's salty. It's just slightly on the back note, okay? So the reason why I started doing this was when I was in WSWA, and I was really trying to kind of highlight the difference between what we're doing and what other whiskey brands are doing. And when you're talking about cognac maturation anyway, it's a fairly complex process. It's a complex finish because French oak and cognac casks naturally have quite a strong, mature, heavy rancio note in the wood. That's why those casks are fantastic. And even before the era of bourbon cask maturation, it was cognac casks that were used quite a lot for Irish whiskey, predating in the 17th century. Unlike others who are dabbling in cask finishes, we have a direct route to Camus, which, as you know, is the famous cognac house in France. They're independent since 1863. They've got 5 generations of expertise. So these guys definitely have the best quality of casks. So with the single malt, we're talking a 5-year-old malt Irish whiskey finished for up to 6 months in these cognac casks. Malt whiskey can take more of the cognac cask finish than a blend because it's a malt whiskey, okay? If you let a blended whiskey sit for 6 months in a cognac cask, it would totally cannibalize the blend and it's destroyed. Whoosh, waste of juice, okay? But I find with this single malt, first of all, it kind of says it all with the color. It's a little bit darker, shows a little bit more of a kind of a darker mahogany brown. And that is very much what's imparted from the cognac cask. As well as the malt. But when I try to explain what island maturation is, that's why I start to experiment with salt, okay? So first of all, I'm just gonna ask you, just raise the malt up into your nose. And in this case, I'm using, you have the two, I'm using a much closer little tasting glass to really get my nose in there. And ultimately, I'm getting lots of dried fruits and heavy on the malt, right? It's just got what you'd expect from a single malt. It's triple distilled as well. It's got fine legs on it, even though it's a young whiskey. But ultimately what I'm getting on the back of that are these really dried fruits like apricots, raisins, plums. It's kind of a little bit of spice on the back end of the nose, okay? So we're gonna taste it first, Tim. Then we're gonna go back, cleanse our palate, and then we're gonna taste it again with a pinch of salt, okay?
All right.
All right, cilantro to you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, mama.
It's so good.
It's one of the whiskeys, I mean, I adore our blend just as much, but this has become more of an occasion for me to appreciate the single malt, especially when I'm in company and I can really have a conversation about it, because people tend to whiskey lovers tend to have maybe more experience with malts, and there's a single malt conversation that can go on until 2 a.m., right? We've all been to those ones.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, but I think this is a young whiskey that punches well above its weight.
It's so good. I had this for the very first time last October, and I've been in love with it ever since. So it is an amazing, just great sipper. So
thank you so much. I'd love to take full credit for all of that, but I can't, because I'm not the master blender. And those guys, I mean, the process of this, Tim, is mind blowing. We're not a distillery, okay? What we do is we buy our liquid in bulk from an independent source. And we make sure then that that is to our specification. We then buy mature bulk goods as well. And then what we do is we take over the entire process of maturation, blending and finishing, okay? And we are sending, that process is complicated, okay? Because we're not just doing it in one location. We take water from Lambay Island, which is the Trinity Well. There was once a volcanic spring. So we take water off of the island of Lambay. We bring it down to our distillery provider in Cork. It's brought through its normal process of osmosis and filtration, and then it's used in the finish of our whiskey, okay? We then take our casks from France by boat to Lambay Island. They're left sit there. We bring our spirit up from the distillery in Cork. We expunge it into those casks. We let it sit for a period of time, and then we test and trial consistently until it reaches that type of potential. And those tests mean sending them back to France. So I'm giving away some of our secrets here. So it's a consistent period of testing and sampling before we take that cask off of the island of Lambay, bring it back down to the distillery in Cork where it's bottled, and it gets then into your bottle and glass. So this isn't something about just simply, oh, we'll toss it in a cognac cask and we'll stick a label on the bottle and there you go, you've got your single malt. It's a very refined, innovative process to create what we are tasting. And I do appreciate that. I really, really do. So back to the salt, okay? So for me, the finish on this whiskey is long and lingering with a hint of spice. So therefore it really coats the mouth. And as you're talking, it tends to extend down into the middle of the chest. It's a lovely, warm, glowy feeling. What we love in a malt. The blend cuts a little bit shorter in the throat, but is, however, very smooth. So what I want you to do now is take a little pinch of your sea salt. Okay. I'm using Atlantic sea salt, keeping it close to home, of course. And I just want you to take your glass and I just want you to just put a tiny little sprinkling into your glass. Over the shoulder, that's it, you got it for luck.
There we go.
Now, you know, this isn't something I'm condoning everybody to do at home with their single malts, but it's just a little bit of a science class, you know? So what you're gonna do now is, first of all, just swirl it in the glass, make sure it's dissolving nicely. And this is why I want to experiment with you, because as we create product for the future and we lay single malt down for extended periods of time on Lambay, they're going through different seasonalities of spring and summer and that kind of salt environment where they're absorbing all of that kind of maritime air. Lambay Island and the east coast of Ireland has the highest portion of salt concentration in the whole of Europe. So that's why I'm doing this experiment. So now I want you to take a sip, and naturally, you're going to have something different on your palate.
Mm.
Okay? So what are you getting, Tim?
I'm getting a lot more fruit. Am I supposed to?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not just salt. This is the whole point. It's not just about, oh, I'm going to taste salty whiskey. It's actually, you're again pulling apart those, I suppose it's the science of it. You're pulling apart the taste variants within the whiskey, and you are getting more fruit. You're pulling back on the malt, and it's pushing the fruit forward tones into your palate.
That is a great little trick. Everybody should be doing that. Just a little salt inside your Lambay.
Just a little bit, you know, and I think it doesn't mean that you don't have to, you know, restrict yourself to just our brand. What you really need is a single malt that has a good depth to it. You know, it needs to have a lot of depth. It needs to have a complexity to it that can draw apart those different profiles within the liquid. And that's why I choose this. So,
well, and that's a good segue into question 3. So Lambay is a great marriage of two families. You have your Irish whiskey and your cognac family that came and created something really great. What would be the next great experiment that you're, again, getting into like the salt or something along those lines? What would you like to see next? And not even saying with Lambay, just more like your own personal flavor profile of what would be something that you'd like to experiment more with and whiskey.
yeah. Okay. I guess, you know, The beauty of the Irish whiskey category at the moment is because we're not restricted as we are, as the Scots are with their technical profile. We've got a lot of depth and diversity. We can really experiment with different cask finishes. While the distillers, can experiment with different mash bills and different types of production processes. That's something I don't know very much about. I'm very much into wood and the effect that wood has on any type of alcohol. Just as much as I'm a wine fanatic, it would just be just as much as I'm a whiskey fanatic. Interestingly, where I have been to in places of like Japan and also in places like Portugal and Spain, I'm seeing the effect of, climatic conditions on casks. I've seen some interesting play with casks that are very deep in different types of soils that have absorbed, high soil concentrations and then re-dried and re-charred. I've seen some really extraordinary experiments going on, and maybe some people will call it, a marketing deal, but when somebody places a cask deep in a cave and then smokes it for a month long organically and then puts a mescal into it and then, diffuses it and tries it with a white wine, I'm interested. I really am interested because we're living in an era where innovation is happening around every corner and people are always looking for that something new. But without the hype of ridiculousness, I think we still need to keep a certain sense of reality here, So I'm really excited for how I can connect, and I'm thinking of products that we're doing in the future. We're going to be bringing out a whole series of single malts. Some will be very mature, some will be above 15 years of age, but how we craft those into our different taste portfolios will be very much a marriage of discussions that I'll have with our master blender and our production team, as well as we're looking at particular areas on Lambay Island at the moment where they have, from the north side to the south side, have completely different climatic conditions. They're totally different. You have the wild crashing Atlantic on one side, and you've a completely passive, almost tropical climate on the other side. It's bizarre when the island is only 2.5 kilometers long. Tim, really, where's the future going to lie? I think with Irish whiskey, it's going to continue to be full of experiment and innovation and delight. I'm so excited about it. Right. It's a cute little bottle. We're not very masculine. We're not very feminine. We're kind of non-gender. We're really not about, telling you where and when to drink it and how you should drink it and giving you a slogan. That's not what we are. We're just about quality and we're about taste and making sure that you deserve the occasion and whence you drink your liquid.
Excellent. Well, and that actually gets us into our next drink and our next question. So what are we drinking first?
We are drinking one of my favorite cocktails. I just love the New York Sour. And it's not just because you're in New York, Tim, and you're from New York, but really and truly, I tasted this actually in Denver, Colorado for the first time when I was up there doing the Aspen Food and Drinks Festival. And the bartender served this to me, and I just, oh my God, I fell in love with it the minute I tasted it. And so I've endeavored to reproduce it, so Slotcha.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That is good. All right. So question 4, which kind of gets back to something that you touched about. And one of the things that I really love about your guys' Instagram page is that drink your whiskey however you want it. But the one thing you guys don't shy away from is you're all about putting Lambay in cocktails.
Big time.
You love, I love to see where you, what you're putting in. And I'm a firm believer that no spirit, as long as the person knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Not again, there's whiskey that, can be sipped on neat, over ice, however you want it. The only thing I draw a line on is whiskey and Coke. Only one person in the world can have that, and he's dead. So.
Yeah. No, listen, I mean, Tim, the reason why, and I suppose, you know, as brand manager, I'm big into cocktails, but that's not the reason why. Our drink strategy is about cocktails, because we're dealing about, you know, if I was to look at this from the outside in from a bartender's perspective, I'm looking at an Irish whiskey in the blend first, which is really smooth, has floral notes to it, works with any fruit variant, can work with any kind of soda variant. It doesn't have pot still in it, so therefore you're not competing in terms of, sometimes pot still can be a bit sharp or spicy for a cocktail, depends what you're into. I'm not in any way saying that is the law, but our blend just seems to work so well with cocktails. And most of the feedback I received from many of the bartenders we've pitched it to is like they're trying it out as their house pour in their cocktails. They identify that it has a bit more intensity and flavor. It's got a little bit of spice. The cognac cask finish doesn't automatically kind of dictate what the cocktail is, but it certainly adds a layer of complexity to it, which I think is exactly what we want. We're also seeking out consumers. You know, I don't know, I think the US is years ahead in terms of cocktail consumption and always has been compared to us in Ireland. We're catching up, but we're seeing young people here, young guys and girls who are ordering, you know, espresso martinis, whiskey sours, old fashions with their bartenders. And it has, you know, it's great to see that. So I'm all about giving you a good cocktail with good quality product. Why do we have to serve cocktails with under the shelf cheap liquor that probably looks great in the glass but tastes like crap, and your head is going to really hurt the next day?
Yep.
Yes.
So it's premium all the way, good quality cocktails with good quality ingredients. And that's just something we advocate for, definitely.
Other than the sour then, what is your favorite go-to cocktail at the moment?
At the moment, I'm very much into a kind of what's called the Irish, the Gold Rush, which was made for us by, introduced to me by Natalie Migliorani from Beautiful Booze. You might know her. She's been over here to Lambay a couple of times. She's a great mixologist. And she just really combined those beautiful kind of sweet tones that we have with honey.
Yep.
You know, so it's kind of a classic mix in a way where you have bourbon cask matured blended Irish whiskey with a honey and maybe possibly a sweet variant on top of it, and you know, whether it's an apple juice or a tonic, but it works really well. It's summer, you don't want anything too intensive or heavy. So even in the summer, for me, I'm more of a mixed drink kind of girl than an intense cocktail, depending on where I am, and particularly because we're in lockdown or half lockdown at the moment and we're home bartending, I focused an awful lot on not making life too complicated. You know, we're at home, we've got a bottle of whiskey, we've got an apple, we might have some tonic, we might have some fruit juice, lucky people might have some bitters, you never know.
Yeah.
But it's just about how do you kind of make it easy and approachable for people to just become their own home bartender and actually like what they drink. And trust me, it gives nobody any greater pleasure when you're having a barbecue and a couple of friends and family around and you make up one hell of a punch bowl and you can serve that out and everyone's just having a beautiful summer drink. It's the best thing ever. It's fantastic.
Agreed.
So one of my go-to summer, let's say we're having a garden party, Tim, okay? We're inviting the friends around. We've got the band in the corner, you know, playing cool tunes. It's you, me, maybe 20 guests. So I'll just make up a huge big bowl, okay? Like a massive champagne bowl. And I'll put a whole mum of champagne in there. Now it has to be the good stuff, okay? You chop in your strawberries, your mangoes, your pineapple. You make it really tropical. Then you add a bottle of small batch blend, okay? You add probably a couple of quarts of little bit of sugar syrup in there because it's going to be quite dry from the champagne. And then you can add a bitters of your choice. So if you want to go more for lemon bitters or you want to do something a bit more exotic like elderflower, chuck it in there, give it a good stir, put in a bag of ice, serve that out as a massive punch bowl cocktail. You're done.
It's been sitting on my shelf since the day it arrived. I've been so excited.
Oh my God, have you not tasted it yet?
No.
Seriously?
Nope. I saved it because it had to be for the show. So I can't wait. Like that's just.
Okay, pop that cork, Tim. Oh, I love that sound. I love it. I love it. I love it.
So go ahead.
Okay, so you are pouring a sample that I've sent to you of Cask 4596, which is the exclusive global exclusive of our first cask sold of our single malt, single cask strength to Dubai duty free. So Dubai global duty free, as in the shops, bought the cask off of us directly, of which they got upwards of close to 400 bottles. So the sample you're drinking from is from bottle 156, from cask 4596, and it is at 57.9% alcohol proof.
Wow. Cheers.
Okay. Slán sin accorda.
Oh, it smells amazing.
Mm.
Oh my God. Oh.
I know. So first of all, let's shout out to the glass that we're drinking it from, because I think for moments like these, it is only the Tua glass that renders to the taste of this particular whiskey, to appreciate the nose, the way it looks in the glass, right?
And to the only other platinum glass out there.
Indeed.
So
yes, we're bonded by platinum too.
yes, we are friends for life now. Like that's thanks to Rosie. We are friends forever.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something a little bit surprising in terms of it's still a young whiskey, Tim. Okay, we're talking maybe 5 years old. Okay,
still
it is one of when we launched the brand in 2018, but we had whiskey on the island from 2017. Okay, so this would belong to one of the first few casks that we laid down on Lambay, and we just let it sit there. We just, as I said, what we're doing consistently is letting casks sit and experiment and watch and see how they interplay with the environment that they're in. So we decided to reserve 20 of these casks, and each cask naturally is undiluted, has not been moved from day one where it has been there. So therefore, every cask has a different taste profile. Okay, whether it's on the eastern side of the warehouse room or the northern shore, or is facing the brisk westerly winds coming through the walls, it has a fascinating interplay in what goes on with the wood. And I personally can vouch for that, because I went onto the island and I got to taste a lot of these casks, and it was mind-blowing how different they were. So cask 4596 was one of 3 that were sent to Dubai to taste, which they did, and they chose this cask. And they chose it particularly because it felt that it suited the taste portfolio that was being sought after by their customers, particularly going through to Asia from Europe. And also because they really picked up on the more exotic notes in the whiskey compared to what they have on shelf at the moment, okay?
It feels very, like I do get that tropical flavor. Like that is very much, like I'm not getting a lot of the spice yet, but I totally am getting that high end, like just tropical feel. Like it just, and again, it just comes down to, like it's perfect. It just, it's all warm and tasty, and it's just,
it's really, really smooth. So we do need to ask ourselves, so where does blending come in with a single cask strength? Like, what is the art of the blend in a single cask strength? And really what it's about is that cask may seep during its time, it may leak. So we will have to transfuse it into another cask of a similar age and profile in order for it to, to be able to have it. So you have maybe a first fill or a second fill in order for that liquid to evolve and mature in a profile. But it is undiluted. And therefore, there is an art of blending in that. There is an art of understanding, okay, when do I know it's reached its highest point of concentration? when do I know it's reached its point of where we have to pull back? You know, and then I think that's something that is quite surprising, especially when you go to the likes of Asia, where it's expected at a high ABV, and if it doesn't burn the throat off you, it's not worth talking about. It's a completely different perspective to whiskey. But when I drink this, I'm actually drinking something that's way above what I would expect, and I just find it so utterly smooth. It's alarming.
And like you said too, for the percentage it is, like you would normally assume the burn, like it should be just totally torching your throat, but it is so smooth. It is so.
There's a flower that grows on the island from May until July called cowslip. It's kind of a yellow, very tiny little flowers, yellow petals. It almost grows in kind of grasslands near the sea as well on the west coast of Ireland. But it has such a perfume to it and such a kind of an eloquent, soft type of herby note to it. And that's what I'm getting in this.
Oh, it is.
Just some beautiful bouquets coming out on this right now. You know, even in August, September this year, we're bringing out a new product, a new malt that's coming out. It will be quite an extraordinary blend of double and triple distilled whiskey. Again, finished with our signature cognac cask, but again, it's pushing the boundaries out in terms of innovation. And it'll be 43%. So,
very nice.
Yeah. I guess what we want to be recognized for, Tim, is we care. You know, we put a lot of effort into our blend, in our finish, and making sure that the concentration and balance is there. And like that, we're drinking a 57.9% single cask strength, and it is going down like honey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is so good. Like this is just, oh, yeah.
Life is good.
Yeah, you can't complain on that one. Like that is.
So like you are the first guy in the USA to taste that single cask strength.
Oh, and I'm gonna pour a little bit more just because it's so not, and then it's gotta get hidden because
you
gotta save that much because it's just that good until we get a bottle. So until you taste, like I wanted it on the design and just because it was cask strength and rare. Now I want it because it's just that fucking good. Like it literally is. Like that
is the point.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how much you dress up a bottle, and you can have the best designers and you can have the best marketing teams, but if that liquid is not good, and if that liquid doesn't reflect what it is in the bottle, what's the point? And that is exactly my modus operandi, Tim, you know, is that this is something that we're really excited about. And if you're comparing a 5-year-old single cask strength to a 12-year-old cask strength, coming from a history of master legends and Middleton and that, I'm very pleased. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So let's try and put a summary on this, right? So in terms of journeys, the small batch blend is your day tripper going out, somewhere on a little day trip.
Yep.
Your single malt is when you're taking your friends with you and you want to go for maybe an overnight stay somewhere and have a little bit of an experience. And your single cask strength is when you're going on the road, long-term, baby, for the kill, with lots of adventures, and every day is different.
So, question 5. With all these rock bands, you got Bob Dylan with Heaven's Hill, you got Metallica joining in. Do you think that one day we'll see a Catcher in the Rye make its return with Lambay whiskey?
Oh my God, humdinger. Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. I've been asked a couple of times about that. I really have.
We can flip the coin can tell us, so.
Hey, flip the coin. The coin.
I gotta fuck no. But I really feel like it should be a fuck yeah, but it.
No, really, I'm comfortable with that because, oh man, that's a funny story. So yeah, in a past life, yes, I am a musician and a singer-songwriter. And yes, I was a professional musician until I was 32. So yes, I've traveled around the world, and I've recorded and played with my brother, and our thing was, no matter where we played, as myself and my brother would hire session musicians to just play with us very spontaneously. So if we pitched up in New York tonight, we would be there a few days previous, and we would go find the best session musicians that we liked. We would bring them in, we would have one rehearsal with them, and then we would just play live one night in a bar. And that was our thing, because we wanted to capture the spontaneity and artistry of people, and we wanted to have great sessions playing great songs. And that's what we did. And I can't believe I'm talking about this, but and then after that, you know, I was very fortunate to be able to travel, and you know, we support the likes of David Gray, and you know, and we were the house band in our local town in Limerick, where we supported acts, and yeah, and I formed other bands around the world, and I traveled throughout South Africa and Spain, and you know, it was great. It was a great experience. Never quite found the number one spotlight or reached the highs of rock stardom, but we got to experience some pretty amazing things.
So cheers. Thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully we'll be able to do this in person very soon. So thank you.
I look forward to today.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Whiskey Wednesday.
Cheers. Thank you. Sláinte.